Hey everybody, it's Sean from Low Code Approach. Thanks everybody for, all the amazing suggestions that we had all year and guests to talk to and just topics to cover. We had a blast with that. We can't wait to do more, and we need your help with more topics at aka.ms/ low code topic request. We also need your help with ratings and reviews on whatever platform you use to get your podcasts. So please drop a rating, drop a like, and follow us on LinkedIn at the Low Code Approach LinkedIn group. Can't wait to see you there. Hey everybody, welcome to a new episode of the Low Code Approach. I'm Sean Feeney, a Senior Product Marketing Manager on the Power Platform team. Now, here's usually where I pass the mic over to Wendy, but Wendy is on an audio-only baking challenge right now, so we'll await the results of that and be able to report back next time we record with everyone. So who do I pass it off to now? Jocelyn.
That's General Jocelyn to you, Sean. General Jocelyn Panchal here of Power Platform Dataverse Business Applications and also Copilot Security nowadays. And I'm also here with always Brother Kenrick. Kenrick.
Thank you for using my full legal name again, Jocelyn, very much. It also sounded like you were very confused into what department you actually report to now.
There's a lot of reorgs, dog.
With that said, yes, hi everyone. My name is Ken Aguilard. I am Principal Program Manager here within Power Platform, and Houston has thawed out. I can now drive around again. So, Jocelyn, who do we have with us today?
We have somebody very special with us today. Somebody who, coincidence, I don't know, happens to have the same last name as me. While I am Jocelyn Panchal, General, we are joined with Admiral Amit Panchal, Principal Airquote Product Manager of Microsoft Graph. Admiral Panchal, how are you doing?
Great to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. And thank you for the privilege of joining these fine colleagues here to share the work we're doing in Microsoft Graph and Copilot engineering.
Awesome. So, Admiral, tell me, what do you do in Graph and what is Graph?
I think it may be beneficial to go back and give you a little bit of a history before we go to exactly what Graph is. As you know, Microsoft has various product lines. We have Office, we have SharePoint, we have OneDrive. Back many years ago, every one of these product teams operated independently. They had their own data structures, they had their own control mechanisms, they had everything that was pretty much isolated. But as we went into the cloud, leadership says we need a common underlying fabric, common underlying framework on how all these products will integrate and work well together. Therein began the creation of what we call the graph. But even before that is a thing called the substrate. The substrate is the underpinning layer of everything that happens within Office 365. You think of networking, you think of storage, you think of firewall, you think of compliance. All the various products we have in M365 rely on that substrate platform to communicate, to collaborate. On top of that, how you access substrate is what we call the Microsoft Graph. The Microsoft Graph is the entryway into all the data a corporation has. Every customer has their own graph environment per se, right? That contains all their emails, all their chats, all their documents. That is the entire body of their enterprise data within the M365 framework. So you have substrate, you have graph. Every customer has their own graph, and we run a global service making sure that every customer has a secured environment, a compliant environment. I'll ask you fine folks a question here, right? How many users do you think the graph supports on a daily basis?
I'm gonna go. Wait, are we playing Price is Right rules here? Like,
Sure, Price is Right rules.
sweet. So every day I'm gonna go take a stab and say 20 million.
20 million.
That's too small. I would guess around like 3, maybe 4. Let's say 2.5 to 3 billion.
Okay, General Jocelyn.
I feel like I have insider knowledge. Brother Ken said, what, 2.5? I will go 2.7 billion.
Gotcha. The winner is Mr. Sean, a very well under 700 million monthly active users. On a given day, how many emails do you think you process? On a single day, think of every user out there that's, running Microsoft services. Every company, how many
I got
emails
a
do you think?
thousand alone myself a day.
I was gonna say, wait, are we including spam? Because like my number will jump up exponentially then
Everything.
if that's the case. Oh, geez, like you're probably saying 3.4 trillion is my guess.
I'm gonna go with the billions again because like it's email we're talking about here, right?
We run about 18 billion emails per day, 2.3 billion files per day, and over 110 billion signals are generated per day. That is the underpinning of everything within the Microsoft 365 family. And the graph is super important because the world relies on our service. Every bank, the US government, the military relies on us to ensure safe and effective communication, right? We have a unified data structure. We're obviously helping people do their jobs better. It's secure, it's compliant, but more so is the fact that this is a key foundation of our strategy. Substrate and the graph, it provides a foundation to apply machine learning to across our entire platform of Office, Outlook, SharePoint, and Teams. When I say, please find me all files from Ken related to Project Catapult, Copilot knows who's Ken, what's Project Catapult. It goes into my emails, my graph, my personal graph, finds out that you've emailed your brother Ken 18 times this week. This is the Ken you're referring to. Goes into my SharePoints and documents to say, this is Project Catapult. Do you have access? And surfaces up together. So it's a very, very powerful data warehouse per se. And I always say, when I talk to CEOs and CFOs, I ask them, what's your most important data asset? They go, Amit, of course, my CRM, my ERP, my financials, that's great. What they're now realizing that their productivity platform is equally important, if not more important, right? Example, I know Sean really well. Well, Nick, do you know Sean? He's the CMO of Microsoft. All right. How do you know him? I can see that I've emailed Sean 20 times. He has responded back 20 times. We have a very strong relationship. More so, I can see that I've emailed him and he responds back within 10 minutes. Really powerful data analytics, and customers are leveraging the collaboration platform of M365 to build patterns in terms of how they communicate with their customers, see patterns and trends, and what to discuss, what to offer as well. So again, the graph is a very, very powerful data warehousing tool as well there.
Wow, Sean, if this was based off of email responses, the graph would not think we're close.
Accurate, 100% accurate. We're very distant in that sense. Thank you so much for that, Admiral. I really appreciate all that background and what graph is in the context. This is a low code podcast where we primarily talk about Power Platform integrations, and everything. So there's two things I want to touch on. Why would a Power Platform user or organization utilizing Power Platform care? And then a lot of the characteristics you said about graph also apply to Dataverse. And so what's the difference there?
Love it. So as you know, Power Platform, I'm repping the brand here. It's a very, very powerful tool to build custom applications, custom bots. So now let's say I'm an analyst, right? And now I am working on to schedule meetings with my other 1,000 analysts. And the team has built a calendaring application. I need to find the expert on cryptocurrency located in Dubai. How do I even begin in doing that? I can search around, ask people around, and. However, now a Power Platform analyst can use the graph. Remember, the graph is the entryway into the Substrate platform. He can run a set of complex queries. Find me a person who has cryptocurrency in their title. Find me the person who's located in Dubai, and they can use those characteristics and those API calls to query the graph, to query the substrate to say, oh, the person who's this expert in their title is Jocelyn. She's located in Dubai. She's a cryptocurrency lead. I can now build an API programmatic call into the graph and incorporate those results into the bot building, into the application I'm building, and use that furthermore to now basically build out a whole solution. And I'm not only going to query the graph, but I want to query my other applications, my ServiceNow, my Jira, my ERP. That's the power of the Copilot Studio, the Power Platform framework there. You can query multiple data sets. So now, if I'm trying to schedule a meeting for my customer on a cryptocurrency, I have the opportunity, I have the sales, I have the expert. I can run an entire process to send them the invite, coordinate the planning, find times, and I have to actually produce the document as well. So therein lies the power of bringing the Power Platform stack together with the graph and other data sources also. And we're seeing some customers build some amazing tools, agents and bots and workflows and automations, incorporating not only the graph, but these other platforms also.
All right. So you've already triggered me like many, many times because now I'm worried. How do I know I can't access Sean's data since you're telling me that it stores everything?
Love it. Love it. So when a developer you want to leverage the graph, the first thing they need is a service principal. They need access. They need rights. The Office 365 administrator has full control in what level of access that developer is given. And usually it's a service account, it's a service principal. That developer is given access to say you, and in an example of the cryptocurrency, you are given permission to read everyone's title. Great. Do that. You are giving permission to see their calendars. The permission the Office 365 admin gives to that developer can be scaled down to as limited as possible, right? We can say you can only see people's first names. You can't see anything else. You can get as granular as you want. Those API calls are locked down specifically to allow a restrictive set of access, nothing more, nothing less, right? By put those guardrails in place, developer can query the CEO's emails, but he's never going to get anywhere because those a service principal and a service account he's been given has been very, very narrow and granularly defined on what they can read, what they can access. And keep in mind, we can go further. They can only read, or they can read and write. Get to that level of granularity also.
So, okay. So you're telling me it's secure. How extensible is it? Am I limited in what I can add into the graph? Can I add custom properties? What exactly can I do? And the reason why I'm asking is because, like Sean mentioned, we're a low code podcast. So obviously, Power Platform can utilize the graph, right? Hence why you're here. So, what metadata can we tie into, and so on and so forth?
Love it. So let's pick an example of Teams. Teams very powerful, very robust, right? I, as the office administrator, the Teams administrator, have given Jocelyn access to notify and update a Teams channel. Great. I've given her access to access Teams, but only these sets of teams or these particular channels. So now we go into Power Platform side. I use a service principal, a service account. I can now go in and modify Teams messages to add Teams messages. I can say, here's your confirmation of your meeting. Here's this. Here's the application that you're looking for, right? Basic stuff, right? But we can scope it down to what they can do. So in Teams, you can post messages. You can read messages, right? You can define that level. You can try to summarize transcripts. You can go to that level of detail. If you go to the SharePoint site, we can say, look, every time a proposal is created within Power Platform, take that proposal, put it onto the SharePoint site. So that application level permissions is put down specifically to say you can add files to the SharePoint site. All you can do. So you have that full control of how granularly deep you want to go in terms of this. Majority of the use cases we see is add a file here, post the Teams channels here, look at a calendar, schedule a meeting, all the basic things we see, send an email out, or some of the basic things we see out of the onset, right? But more and more, we're seeing some complex use cases come out as well. I mentioned the one I know Sean really well. Is that good? Is that important, right? But now customers are saying, look, I need to find who's the expert in this topic. I need to go ahead and see, who knows who across the organization. We're seeing different ways of building out different scenarios, combining that with other data sources also.
So you talked a lot about all of these different actions that you can perform with Graph, and I'm getting connector vibes. And some of the listeners might know that in another life, like a whole 15 months ago, I used to drive the Power Platform connector ecosystem. When do I use Power Platform connectors? When do I use Graph connectors? What are the similarities? What are the differences? How are these scenarios related or are they not related?
Love it. At Microsoft, we tend to make things a little bit confusing, right? There are Power Platform connectors, there are Graph connectors, there are Azure connectors, right? So one thing I want to keep in mind, remember, when I asked the question, show me files from Ken related to Project Catapult, what that's doing is the AI, the bot is going through all my emails, all my chats, and find that information. As part of that process, we have created what's called a semantic index. This index is built a very complex mapping of everything that I know, relationships, signals, similarities, rankings. We've built this amazing index to say, this is the knowledge I know, this is the knowledge you know, Mitt. We're going to surface it up here. Now, the first thing is a graph connector. This allows you to bring third-party data put it directly into the graph. Once it's in the graph, in the substrate, we also make it part of the semantic index. So let's say, for example, we bring in ServiceNow data, right? I can now have my ServiceNow tickets. I can have my ServiceNow knowledge base as well. So when I ask the question, show me information about Project Catapult, not only will the Copilot surface up my emails and chats and documents, it'll also surface up ServiceNow information, ServiceNow queries, and so forth. So I'll give you the best example, and I'll compare this with the Power Platform connector. If I ask the question, how do I reset a password? We have a ServiceNow Power Platform connector, and we have a ServiceNow Graph connector. If I ask that question through the Power Platform connector, it'll go out via an API call. It'll say, oh, here's how I go ahead and do it. It's article 123. Here's the answer. That is a ServiceNow Power Platform connector. If I ask the same question via Graph connector, keep in mind, we've taken all this data from ServiceNow, put it in. How do I reset a password? I ask that same question. I'll say, oh, it's ServiceNow article 123. By the way, the author of the article was Sean. As a matter of fact, Ken is also working on this similar thing across the street here, right? It brings together a lot more knowledge and a lot more detail in terms of how you actually access the data and it surfaces a more meaningful information. Power Platform Connector is a simple API call. A Graph Connector is semantically indexed and gives you knowledge and reasoning as well there.
So I'm going to ask like the most technical question that's ever been asked on this podcast. Why do we call it graph? How did that name come about?
So the graph databases are a pretty common in the industry. Google has a very large graph database. It says Snowflake graphs, others out there. The graph is basically a subset of data which has vertices, has indexes, has embeddings, right? That is a common name for the graph there as well in terms of how everything, it's not a flat file database. It's basically a relational across the entire spectrum of all the data you have. So yes, it is per se a graph database, but it's much more complex than a normal simple graph because we do a lot more relationship mapping. We do a lot more experience on top of it as well to make sure that we build this out. As a matter of fact, there are really two graphs within every organization. One is a tenant-wide graph, what the company knows. There's also a second graph called the user index or the user graph, where this is what I personally know and information that's relative to me to kind of surface up in a meaningful way as well.
Along the lines of the naming, do you guys have a mascot?
Yeah, so Boo, our mascot is a very affectionate giraffe. Symbol giraffe. There's I'm sure you've seen some pictures of it online there.
I've seen people come to meetings in a full giraffe suit, head to toe.
Yes.
Good thing Toys R Us is out of business.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want to grow up either. Say I'm a Power Platform developer, right? Like I'm building solutions, I'm building custom connectors and come across a point where it's like, hey, I need to utilize graph. Do I just is that just free for me? Like I can just go and do this? Or like what does that actually cost to start building out solutions?
So keep in mind, right? The graph is something that we have created for us and Microsoft to use, right? It is for us to deliver email services, chat services to our customers and users. That's why we built the graph. But again, it's a customer's data. So I want you to think of the graph and the substrate as a superhighway. The superhighway connects the city, right? And this city's had many skyscrapers. It has the Outlook skyscraper, the SharePoint skyscraper, the Teams, and all this data is being transferred via 18-wheel tractor trailers, high-speed bullet trains, because we're servicing this to our customers. Now, a developer wants to say, I want to look at this team's calendar. They can't simply go on the highway. What happens is they can get a service principal, service account. They get to go on this highway via a moped and a backpack. They're on the moped, they're on the backpack. They can query little bits of information and kind of get it out there as well. So we do have limits in place. We do have throttles in place. But yes, access to the graph via an API is free. You can't say, show me everyone's calendar availability for the month of January and who's free from 12 to 1. That is a very complex query. You will get throttle, you will get limited. You may say, show me Jocelyn's calendar for January 15th. Yes, you can pull that query down to a small subset. So customers are using this moped analogy to pull little bits of information out. And of course, data is different. So there's different limits in place for SharePoint versus Outlook versus Teams. So there are different controls in place. So if you look up graph throttling limits, you'll see that framework there as one aspect of it as well. So the graph, you can pull a little bit of data out. With graph connectors, you could put data into the graph as well. So different ways of accessing and using the graph to service your business needs there.
This is all great, and I love it. But we're moving into the age of AI. How is the graph evolving? Is it now integrating with Copilot? What are maybe some of the future plans that we have for the graph as it relates to transitioning into, again, this the era of AI?
Love it, right? So again, keep in mind, the graph is the underpinning of everything we do. If I go into my Outlook, I type in the letter K in my Outlook toolbar, it knows I'm talking to Ken because I've emailed you 20 times this week, right? That is a graph call that's happening in the background. Now, if I, in the age of AI, I go to Teams, I go to Copilot, I ask the question, show me files from Ken related to Project Catapult. The Copilot is actually going into the graph, finding information, finding the data, finding the relevant points. It's bringing all this together as well in a single pane of glass. So Copilot is leveraging everything we have built within the graph. And now we're going further as well, right? We've applied some machine learning functionalities, but now as we go into the agent space, I can now say, agent or bot, search this specific SharePoint site for this regulatory document to help me answer these questions. We can now train the Copilot with agent functionality, Power Platform functionality as well, building out bots to search this specific area of the graph, this specific data portion of the graph to give you the most relevant answer you're looking for there as well.
So, I mean, you gave us a ton of knowledge and possibilities, right? With graph, like there's a ton. So where do I get started? What do I actually do to learn more if I want to start building out solutions or understand graph?
Yep. So if you go to our learn pages, learn.microsoft.com, you'll find specific sections on the graph, how to set up a graph API. If you go to explorer.graph.com, let me find the exact URL, but I'll tell it to you in a second here. Graph Explorer, you can see examples and mock-ups of how to make graph queries and graph calls.
We're not too hot. We're warm off of Ignite. Is there Ignite content that we can refer to?
Oh, absolutely. This is a great session by Jeremy Fake, who has a great discussion on how we're evolving the entire graph ecosystem to support the AI journey. It's the last build session was BRK 150, Developer's Guide to Customizing Copilot. And you'll see lots of information about how to use graph calls and graph queries as well there.
So, quick follow up. Like you mentioned, like I can go and take a look at Graph Explorer and give it a test, right? But, like, the governance and security brain in me is screaming, saying, like, "Am I testing this against my data, my company's data? They'll never let me do that, right? Like, what are my options there?"
Love it. So Graph Explorer is a sandbox environment. So you can kind of see how this works. You can pull basically queries and gets requests and get items from my last OneDrive, get my photo. It's a sandbox environment as well. But now you already have an account at your corporation. You can go ahead and point it to your corporation data. It'll only give you access to what you have access to, right? It'll give you access to your calendar. It'll give you access to your files. Nothing more, nothing less. Because keep in mind, the admin of the environment has not given me any more elevated access. So this is nothing different than I already have access to this. Instead of going to via GUI or via click through, I'm just making a graph API call. So, and we've seen some very proficient developers kind of automate and build API calls to manage their calendars better, manage their files better as well there.
That makes sense. I think that's really good. So, like, we've got a lot of work for our listeners to go and get to start integrating Graph in their solutions if they haven't already, and a lot of learn material to go and check out, and especially all the amazing content that came out at Ignite too. So once we start getting more questions rolling in over here, we're gonna have to get you back on the podcast to give us more, let's say, graph fatherly advice on what to do here. I think that's gonna be fantastic. We really appreciate your time.
That's his new name, the Graph
With
Father.
I'll leave you with an analogy, right? And this is how I see the evolution of graph and AI space going. Imagine you live in your home. Your home is Office 365. It's awesome. Everything's great. You want to make your home a smart home. What do? You get a Google speaker or Alexa speaker. That's great. Alexa, turn on my lights, turn on my sprinklers. Great. All that is M365 Copilot. Uses the graph. Everything's working fine. Tomorrow, you want to add a coffee machine. You say, Alexa, make me coffee. Awesome. But then you go, Alexa, make me coffee, add the milk, add the sugar, check the pantry for more beans, and place the order at Costco. The multi-step, turn-by-turn process, that's where Copilot Studio and Power Platform comes in play. It allows me a lot more control on how I make that experience lively and amazing. Now, people are also coffee aficionados. right? They want to grow their own coffee trees. They want to roast their own beans. They want to grind their own metal and build their own coffee press. Great, we could do that too. That's where Azure AI comes into play. So you have the various models, right? One with M365 Copilot will do 99% of the work for you. Copilot Studio allows a lot more customization, control, and management, how you want the data to flow and how you want the process to flow. If you want to build everything yourself, great, we want you to. That's where Azure AI comes into play. And all these things can incorporate the graph, incorporate Power Platform, and allow you to scale your solution based on your business needs there.
Ken loves scaling things. That's Ken's favorite thing to do.
That is true. That is true. He's based his whole career around that. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time on here. We're going to definitely push people to a lot of the knowledge work that's been done and make sure we keep our eyes on the horizon for what's coming forward. Because I believe Build is on the way pretty soon. So we'll probably see some really great announcements over there.
Absolutely. Stand by. We'll see a lot more work on the agent space, on the AI space, and you'll see a lot more evolution of the entire AI infrastructure from Microsoft as well.
Sweet. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And we'll be seeing you guys soon.